Good morning, everybody. We're glad to know you've chosen AFRIQUE Media this morning to inform you. As the press today, will be giving you papers from Africa and outside the continent. Our first stop will be in Zambia. We'll be looking at the Post newspaper. The paper reports that technical hitches and anxiety on Wednesday welcome a new rebased quarter note as they hit the market for the first time. Barclays, Standard Chartered and Echo ATMs were among the first to start dispensing the new currency. Barclays Bank Zambia Public Acting Managing Director Simangorwa Shakilima said Barclays was able to make the transaction with all its 151 ATMs and points of sale machines in line with the Bank of Zambia requirements. The paper equally states that at least one person died and 41 others injured after the unfinished United Church of Zambia UCZ building they were worshipping in to commemorate the New Year collapse in Lusaka. You can complete the story on page 4. Moving over to South Africa, we'll be looking at the Daily Dispatch. This paper cites that although Eastern Cape Arrive Alive has claimed a positive start to the new year with only one major accident, nationally the Road Traffic Management Corporation has expressed concern at the number of fatalities. Still in the paper is written that various Eastern Cape police stations reported the New Year's period as being the safest the province has experienced in the past 3 years. This was echoed in other parts of the country where law enforcement officers reported a decrease in the number of contract crimes such as murder and assault during the New Year celebration. Moving over to Sudan, we'll be looking at Sudan Tribune. According to the paper, the Sudanese President Omar Hassan al-Bashir has agreed to meet with his southern counterpart Salva Kiir in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa on Friday, January 4th. Presidential Secretary Eman Sid Ahmed said the summit will be held for the purpose of speeding up the implementation of what was agreed to before in reference to the cooperation deal signed last September in Addis Ababa. The new date comes into contrast with meeting date originally set for January 13. The paper as well states that the opposition National Omar Party, NUP, announced its participation in a meeting called by the Alliance of Rebel Groups Sudanese Revolutionary Front, SRF, in the Ugandan capital Kampala, and reiterated its commitment to non-violent political struggle to bring change in Sudan. Looking at New Zimbabwe, according to the paper, the year 2012 saw some of the worst performances by sitting MPs and ministers who failed to contribute meaningfully to Parliament's legislative processes, question time and debates. Parliamentarians' main objective or responsibility is to craft legislation and debate issues affecting their constituencies. In another development, the paper cites that the national death toll on the roads has surged to 180 in a little over 2 weeks, compared to just 147 recording during last year's festive season in Zimbabwe. According to police spokesman Andrew Fire, 901 people were injured from 128 smashes since December 15. Moving over to Nigeria, we'll be looking at Business Day. The paper states that fund flows to frontier markets, fixed income and equity assets like Nigeria are set to continue in the medium term as lawmakers in the United States pass a bill averting the so-called fiscal cliff, which threaten to impose spending cuts and tax increases on most citizens of the world's largest economy. Nigeria's gross domestic product (GDP) growth rate is forecast by analysts to recover moderately to above 7.0% in 2013 from 6.6% in 2012. Just below the kicker, there's this other interesting story that says Nigeria was the third most rewarding stock market globally in 2012 behind Egypt and Kenya, as investors harvested 35.47% yield-to-date return on investment from the Nigerian Stock Exchange, NSE. Looking at Ghana Review International, the paper states that a ban on the import of second-hand refrigerators is coming into force in Ghana to reduce energy consumption and harm to the environment. Many old fridges contain chemicals like chlorofluorocarbons, which damage the Earth's ozone layer. The head of Ghana's Energy Commission said the ban that was first introduced in 2008 but extended to give dealers time to adjust made Ghana a pioneer in West Africa. However, some Ghanaian traders have criticized the ban, saying thousands of jobs will be lost. Still looking at the paper, there's this other story that says a former chief manager at the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Johnson Asirma, is urging government to discover and explore new export markets in Africa. According to Dr. Asirma, and current director of macroeconomic management at the West African Institute for Economic and Financial Management, competition and a temporary meltdown in European economies should make African countries to look inward. A lot of Ghana's export currently goes to Europe and the Americas. Moving over to Asia, we're looking at the Wall Street Journal Asia. Today's paper writes that financial markets rallied worldwide Wednesday as investors cheered an 11th-hour deal by U.S. Congress to avoid the so-called fiscal cliff. Investors have been on edge for weeks as the drama played out in Washington, with concerns that the world's largest economy will tip into recession and hamper already fragile global growth. The story continues on page 14. Still in the paper, it's written that amid a rush of newly affluent Chinese eager to move money out of China, U.S. and Canadian border officials are seizing large amounts of cash tucked into wallets, purses and suitcases at airports across North America. Visit the Wall Street Journal Asia if you want to know more on the stories. Now moving over to the United Arab Emirates, we'll be looking at the Gulf newspaper. According to the paper, Finance Minister Darwish bin Ismail al-Balushi on Wednesday announced that Oman will create more jobs for citizens. During a briefing on the budget for 2013, the minister responsible for financial affairs said they have plans to create 56,000 jobs for young Omanis. He added that plans were to place 20,000 youths in the private sector in 2013, while 36,000 will be given employment by the government. In another development, the paper states that new regulations will help the United Arab Emirates save 2 billion liters of water a year and reduce 42,000 tons of carbon dioxide (CO2) emissions in the country. Our last stop will be in Europe, looking at the Europe edition of the Wall Street Journal. Today's edition of the paper states that Portugal's President Aníbal Cavaco Silva sent the 2013 budget to the country's highest court for review, an unusual move that highlights deepening opposition to a 2-year austerity drive. Mr. Silva signed the budget bill into law on Monday, but expressed some reservations the next day. The president last Tuesday expressed doubt about the budget's distribution of sacrifices while calling for an end to the recessionary spiral the country is undergoing. Just below the kicker, this other interesting story brings to our notice the fact that financial markets surged worldwide as investors returning from the New Year's break cheered a deal in Washington to avoid spending cuts and tax increases seen as threatening to cause a U.S. recession. This is why we call it out for the press today on your Pan-African television. Do follow our programs online on www.afrimedia.tv.